Om 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 Gajananam Bhudaganadisevitam Kapittajambo Palasara Bhakshitam Umasutam Shokavinashakaranam Namami Vigneshwara Pada Pankajam Shradananam Kunkumaraktavarnam Madhim Divya Mayuravahanam Rudrasya Sunam Surasainyanatham Guham Sadaham Sharanam Prabhajye Ya Kundandu Tusharahala Dhavala Yashubra Vastra Prada Ya Veena Varadanda Mantidakara Yashveta Padmasana Ya Brahma Jutta Shankara Prabhithivi Devai Sada Pujita Samam Patu Saraswati Bhagavati Nisheshajadhyapaha Om Namah Shivaya Gurave Satchidanandamurte Nishprambhajaya Shantaya Shri Shivanandaya Te Namaha Shri Vishnudevandaya Te Namaha Om Sarmangala Mangalye Shive Savata Sadhike Sharanye Trembake Gauri Narayani Namostute Narayani Namostute Om Shanti 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 Om Peace 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 Om Bol Sadguru Shivan Maharaj Ki Jai Bol Shri Vishnudevan Maharaj Ki Jai Om Namah Shivaya. Good evening, everyone. I welcome you to the talk, The Quest for Happiness. So this is an important subject since many people have a misconception of where happiness comes from, how to be achieved, and so on. Since we're all on the spiritual path, I will share some of the principles that we have studied in order to truly realize that true happiness within us. So we can say that the quest for happiness is probably the only quest. I would believe that all other quests are there existing to fulfill this basic quest or urge to be happy. There is none among us who does not want to be happy all the time. Suppose somebody was to tell you, it's okay if you're 20% happy, would you accept it? You will say, no, you want to be 100% happy. There is something quite interesting about wanting to be 100% happy and always happy. And that seems to be the answer to all our problems. And of course, we're going to discuss this a little later on, since this is only an introduction. So that grand purpose of life that we're all trying to realize, and even though we don't even know what it is, contains within itself this aspect of happiness or ananda or the bliss. And it is, we do all these things, we do so many things in life. We could say all activities are meant to lead us into a state of happiness. Depending, of course, on the guna. You know, the guna is the quality, these are the qualities of prakriti or nature that are present in everywhere, from the highest to the lowest creation within the creation. Depending on the guna, different people look for different source of happiness. For example, the people who are very sattvic will be experiencing happiness in relation to activities that are sattvic. For example, for spiritual people, there will be serving of others, loving others, being kind to others, or perhaps meditating, reading, and so on. For Rajasic people who are inclined to look for happiness within the action itself, and they're driven to action because they're trying to experience the, if I may say, the true potential, true nature, happiness through activity. They are attracted to different activities as a way of fulfilling that urge. And among the most Rajasic, we see people in power, people, searching for great amounts of money and all kinds of powers in their lives. Then among the people who are more in tamasic kind of mode, or the state of ignorance and inertia, whether physically or emotionally, morally, in whatever degree, in whatever phase, they're trying to experience happiness in their own way. For example, some people try to experience happiness by making themselves numb in some ways. For example, through taking drugs or alcohol or excessive sex, which could be both tamasic and rajasic, or it could be also in the ways that we don't even need to discuss, such as the dark side of human nature. So what is common to all these three different types of people is that each one of them tries to experience happiness at its most, and if possible, all the time. So obviously the manner changes, and the manner and the approach to searching for happiness varies from person to person. But the common thing is that we all want to be happy. And that's why we also in this talk, I believe, because we also want to be happy and we want to know how to be happy. Before, of course, we can suggest a few ideas of how to be happy. It's important that we know what happiness is and what happiness isn't. So we live in a mixed world, and this mixed world is a combination of different things. In this world, on one side, we have experienced a pleasure, an enjoyment, some freedom, a joy of existence, of being alive, of knowing, of loving. But yet on another side, we have also known the sorrow, the suffering, the world of limitations, the ignorance, hatred, anger, and also death. So it is interesting that we have this dual citizenship in the world of sorrow and changes, and in the world of pleasure. But in reality, this is the dual citizenship in two domains, one in the absolute, which I'm going to elaborate on, which is our true nature, and the second one is in a relative world of change. We can only find sorrow and other things that I just mentioned at the other side of human nature in the world of change, which is this relative changing world. So we're like a person who is standing in the ocean up to his maybe hips or something like this. So half of the body is above dry and half of the body is wet. So how did this confusion come about that we're not quite sure in which direction also to turn when we are actually searching for happiness? This will be discussed a little bit later on, but now we're just going to examine some background of this subject. Happiness, freedom, and love are synonyms. We could also add the words such as comfort and security also add to the feeling of happiness. But to be really happy means to be free. And to be really free means to be detached. To really be detached means to be desireless in a true sense of the word. Desireless doesn't mean not having things, but it means not psychologically depending on the things that we possess. Because what we commonly know as happiness is a form of a psychological dependence. When we say I'm happy, we say, well, I am happy because of something. I'm happy because I have a partner, or I have money, or I have a good job, or I have a good car, or even I'm if I want to go to a yoga ashram or something like this. So nevertheless, each time we experience this happiness is conditioned by something outside of ourselves. Now that is not where happiness is. And this is why we come to experience this conflict in life. We're looking for happiness, and very often, instead of finding happiness, we find sorrow. We find restlessness and so on. So this can be removed, if I may say, this wrong notion of where happiness is can be removed through the power of satsanga. Satsanga means company of truth, and it means to be able to understand The happiness cannot be found outside. We can find some pieces of happiness, we can have some small joys, but we're not discussing that as true happiness. We don't need to deny that. But at the same time, we know that that is not true happiness because that's going to change in time. And then what happens when something changes in time? We don't need to discuss it. We know it. So the point is that satsanga cures this wrong perception. And it is important to have spiritual talks and attend the spiritual gatherings for this very purpose, even though the subject is very clear and very easy to understand, yet we need a constant reminder. Because of the power of the gunas, of which I mentioned, the rajas and tamas, we tend to search for happiness in wrong directions. And we have not ceased to, in spite of the fact that we're spiritual people, we still seem to be investing our interest and our happiness in the things outside of us without realizing that these things will not bring us happiness. So this is a very, very important to know where happiness is not. Then we will find where happiness is. So, as I said, happiness, freedom, and love are synonyms. And the love is truly an embodiment of bliss, or bliss is an embodiment of love. So each one of these qualities merges into one another. When we understand the full meaning of any one of these words, we come to understand that they mean one and the same thing. Also, peace of mind could be another one. See, when we climb a mountain, we all have a perception of a different path. Here is one path, here's another path, and so on. And these paths seem to be very distinct. However, when we get to the top of the mountain, what happens is we have one and the same view. Each one of us, we may climb to the top of the mountain, over the river, another way, wherever. And when we come to the top of the mountain, we find that that's what it is. So on the top of the mountain, the qualities, or rather the expressions of that one state of one reality, such as happiness, freedom, joy, and so on, they seem to find a common platform. And this is why they're not really separate. Only in our language we separate them because we can only think in terms of distinctions between the objects or principles and so on. So this is the first thing. I would like to now go a little bit through this idea of happiness by examining where we as humans are. So we live in a very restless world. I must say that our world, even though it seems to be more sophisticated and technologically advanced in so many ways, actually showing the signs of the greatest restlessness that has been experienced by humanity. So what we consider to be a progress in the outside is not necessarily a progress within the inside or within. So in this restless world, we're trying to find some peace, some comfort, some security, and some happiness. Each one of us. For example, many people are interested in money. And so what they're trying to do is they believe that they will be happy or have security and everything when they get a lot of more money. But it's interesting that once you have a certain amount of money, the next step is you want to have more money. Because with every gathering of something more, there seems to be an opening for new desires to come in. Therefore, we can never have enough of desires. We can never have enough of money. So the whole idea of needing more to be happy is actually wrong. So we need to look into the quality of things rather than into a quantity of things. We know that. But that is the primary principle behind happiness. There are people who have very little, they're happy. There are people who have too much and they're not happy. There are, of course, people who have very little and are also unhappy. So we need to find the right measure for each one of us. What is it that we need and what is it that we desire? And it is fundamental to experiencing happiness that we need to know the distinction between the desires and needs. In short, needs a few, desires are many. Now, can we have some desires? Of course, there is also a place for desires. But desires need to be sattvic in nature. They need to be managed in a sattvic ways. They need to be given to us, or we need to fulfill the desires through legitimate sources or legitimate ways. So even that is important. But in principle, is the difference is this: when the need is fulfilled, the need subsides. When a desire is fulfilled, it grows stronger. So when we are hungry and we eat, hopefully we don't need anything to think anymore about the food. Maybe not in modern times, but that was the principle. Now, when we have a desire for something, we want to have more of it. And why this? Why is this that we want more of it? It's a complicated story. We don't need to go too much into it. I try to keep our focus a little more on happiness, but just so we know that this is what happens. Some people seem to look in a direction of power as their happiness, as their security. But you know what happens? The more the power, the less security. Some happiness is there, but it is primarily physical, or sensual, or aesthetic, or whatever. But it is not the happiness that we are talking about, which we can define as a yogi happiness or yogi bear happiness. So the point is that, for example, some time ago, China released some missile in the air. And the poor countries, those who are small, what could they do? When the missile is released, whether it's released at them or somewhere else, they don't know. So they were okay. They continued. The only country that rose up to China in terms of its anxiety and power and everything was the America itself. That's interesting. So the more the power, the less security. We must understand this. So we are looking for some psychological refuge in our life. Sometimes, of course, we don't understand that everything is fleeting. Childhood is gone, the youthfulness is gone, all these things. But we are looking for some lasting thing. And it happens to be that the only lasting thing is something that is truly within us and not without us. So we will see this in a minute, how it goes. So we begin this life as seekers of happiness. Unfortunately, we are not just the pure seekers, we are also the beggars. Unfortunately, we beg on and on and on for some little happinesses here and there. Some food here, then some friends here, then some of this, some of that. Continuously trying to piece together one large pie of happiness. And it's not going to happen that way. There's nothing wrong in having friends, having this and that, but knowing that these things are only additional beauty to a person who's already happy. Of course, at times of distress, we need friends, we need money, we need everything. So let us just keep to the yogic perspective of this. So we start our life as seekers. Somehow we have this settled notion in our mind that happiness exists outside. And we were programmed to think that way. From the moment we were born, we were programmed to think, okay, happiness is, you already don't have it. You will be happy only if I give you something. This is what our parents do. So they buy us a toy. Nowadays they buy a game, they buy something, a little phone or something, and say, are you happy now? They keep asking the child, and the child looks at them, what's wrong with you? I'm quite happy anyway, but thank you for this. So in a way, this is how this conditioning took place with upbringing and with certain psychological tendencies, of course. But then what happens is that later in your life, what happens, you already start to develop different attachments as a result of it. Look at how we conditioned even our children, just to kind of go off the point for a few moments. Nowadays, if a child is eating a breakfast, a child is served several types of breakfast, and then is asked, what would you like to eat? Now, let us just think about this. What can a child know at the age of 4 or 5, even 10? What is the best thing for them to eat? I'm not saying the children have some sense, But this way we spoil the children, and we teach them that the way that they would be happy is if they could manipulate the external world. In the beginning, the children manipulate their parents for different things because the parents are telling them, okay, well, if you want to be happy, you may have to make a choice. And so they say, okay, I want to have the choice of this food. And as I said, the main manipulation is not conscious, but is slowly inbuilt, and then gradually they become people who are rather taking everything from world rather than giving. So in our time, when I was growing up, the breakfast was on the table, same breakfast for 4 different people, and we all ate. And there was no problem. Sometimes maybe we'll complain or whatever, but even the complaint was a part of the learning. So we start out life as seekers, we continue it. So not just that we believe that certain objects make us happy, or can make us happy, but also we believe that certain things can mar our happiness. Now, this is another problem. So anyway, this seeking is an endless road, never ending, and some people die as seekers. There's a promise of heavens, like they did not have enough of pleasures here, so they go up in heavens. And in heavens, of course, as we know from our spiritual scriptures, the experiences of happiness are very intense, and all of a sudden, instantaneous, perhaps millions of times stronger than what we have here. So these kind of people also look for some kind of seek again for this happiness even after they die, with the promise. They're looking for some party going up there and so on. So this seeking is verily a misery. And whatever little happiness we experience, we truly experience it only in between these moments of seeking. Buddha said something very interesting. Life is moving from one painful position to another. And of course, whatever is in between, that is what we may consider to be happiness. It's a very interesting thing. So what he was saying is that what people really call happiness is simply the absence of pain, absence of suffering. So there's nothing wrong with that, but that is the happiness that we know. Okay, so the answer is here to stop seeking. Now, of course, why do we seek in the first place if there is nothing to be found out there for us? And this is what leads us to this important part of the talk. This is a spiritual understanding of happiness. So the truth is, what you're seeking outside is already within you. And this is a paradox of our lives. So the actual seeking is not wrong, but we are seeking happiness through wrong means, in wrong places, through power, money, sex, relationships, possessions, and so on. So we are all seeking happiness. So seeking happiness, interestingly enough, is the most legitimate seeking. There's nothing wrong with this because, very interestingly, happiness happens to be our intrinsic nature. And because of that, what happiness is, being our intrinsic nature, we cannot but search for it. We can never stop looking for happiness. I mean, of course, what I'm probably trying to say in this talk, don't depend on things. Don't get attached to it. Don't go out for your happiness. That is the story. But I cannot tell you don't look for happiness, because you will continue to do it. So this is the secret of our life, is that whatever we're doing, consciously or unconsciously, we're trying to give this expression to our intrinsic nature. So this we call Satchitananda. Satchitananda is our true nature. Sat means existence absolute, Chit, knowledge or consciousness absolute, and Ananda means bliss absolute. See, in Sanskrit we have three words, very important. One is called sukham. Sukham means happiness. The translation of sukham in simple words would be like su means good, ka means space. Being in good space is happiness. But sukham has its opposite, which is dukkham. Duhu means bad, ka means kam means space. So being in a bad space is basically being unhappy. But the word ananda doesn't have the opposite. Ananda means bliss or true nature of oneself. So that does not have the opposite quality. So this is the most important thing. The reason I'm saying this is because the true happiness can be found only within, and it is the expression of your true nature. And this quest can never be suppressed by any means, and it can never be stopped until you find the true happiness. In fact, from the moment we're born, from the moment we're clothed in this body and this mind, all we're doing, we're incessantly striving to realize that happiness. In fact, what we're trying to do is to express our already inherent nature. We're trying to express the state of the absolute within us. Isn't it amazing? Every single day you're doing one action, then you're doing next action. You're cooking, then you're cleaning. You need to find your mind in a state of some quietude, some happiness. Everything you do, and anything that can come up and stand in the way of that experience, you would dislike it. Why do people experience anger or hatred or jealousy? Because something is standing in the way of their happiness. Now, we're not saying that this is exactly the right answer or response from any one of us, but this is just what we do. So consciously or unconsciously, we're trying to express this wonderful thing. These three qualities, just to be clear, are not really the attributes of our true nature. They're just helping us to distinguish something important. We see in the relative world of change, we see that things are not lasting. So we call that in Sanskrit asat. Then there is something that is sat, which is that true awareness, or we may say call it now by different names. This is the same consciousness, awareness, and bliss, all one and the same. So we use this description in order to help us distinguish. Now, when we use the word chit, which means consciousness in this case, or knowledge, we also try to distinguish it against certain things in this phenomenal world, which are jada, or which are insentient. The principle of insentience is negated by the word chit. Then we have the word ananda, which means the bliss. So, which negates again the experience of sorrow. So this is Satchitananda is really the expression that we use for addressing our true nature. As I said, they're not really truly the qualities. They're only pointers in a way. The characteristics of that Atman or the self for the purpose of easy understanding on one side, and it's also used in order to distinguish this from any phenomena. Because phenomena means things are changing, time, space, and causation, but Atman, nothing in it is changing. So these Satchitananda terms are the synonyms for that pure consciousness or pure awareness. So they're only a provisional definition of Atman, not the ultimate definition, because we cannot define something that is indefinable by nature. So, since we know this, the last principle, which is called Ananda, the bliss, is something that we experience daily, at least in a deep sleep. Now, we do experience bliss in a form of pleasure throughout the day, in a wakeful state, in a dream state, but because of what we call in teachings of yoga and Vedanta, the instruments or the bodies, they seem to cloud the experience of pure bliss. But in a deep sleep, even though we do not have knowledge as such, pure knowledge, of us being blissful, we know upon awakening that we had a most blissful sleep. Now, in order to be aware of this, there's got to be some knowledge or some kind of an awareness there, or some memory. So some form of a vritti or thought wave must be prevalent throughout the deep sleep. We won't go into it right now, but we know this bliss. This bliss is limitless. We cannot measure it in any kind of a way. It is something that we eagerly long for every night we go to sleep. Don't you make your bed very special, and the lights, and making sure there's no noise? It's like there's almost a ritual there when we want to go to sleep. And it's only for the sake of sleeping in a deep sleep state. Suppose you're tossing and turning all night long. That's not what you want. So if somebody was to stand in a way of our experiencing a deep sleep, such as, for example, somebody wanted to talk to us, we will say, oh, no, just leave it until tomorrow. Then we'll talk. Don't worry. So this is the idea behind this bliss. Now, Swami Shivananda speaks about bliss existing in 11 different degrees. Now, this is taken from the Upanishads, and it's a very interesting statement, because it is said that the humans, amongst all the celestials, experience the least amount of bliss. Then, above them, starting with celestial musicians and different kind of groups of beings, each group of these beings experiences the bliss about 100-fold more than the others. However, the whole secret is in the Upanishads. The reason why this is being said is that the bliss of the pure Atman, or pure consciousness within, is immeasurable. Therefore, it transcends the idea of measurability and any of this 11-fold division. So that's the wonderful thing. So, mind you, when you read these things, you need to have somebody explain it. This degree, the degree of bliss, comes from, I would immediately go to the points, which depends on purity. The greater the purity, the greater the bliss. Why it is because the purity is related to the quality of sattva. And the sattva is the reflector of that pure consciousness, like a mirror. Therefore, the greater the purity, the greater the bliss. This is also true in ethical life. The greater tendency to truthfulness, through controlling of insatiable desires, to non-injuring anybody, to being kind to other people, the greater degree of the bliss. It is when we harm somebody, we hurt somebody, we gossip about somebody, we lie about ourselves to somebody or whatever, our bliss is kind of taken away. Of course, this is from the point of view of the purity. But nevertheless, it's a good point if you want to already think about how can I increase my experience of bliss. This is what needs to be done. For example, many people meditate, but they don't have the blissful experience. Why it is? Because it is difficult to have a blissful experience. To be in a blissful state, spiritual state, it takes a long process of evolution of mind, which has gotten rid of all dross, all impurities, all anger, jealousy, all the tamas, all the rajas. This is why in yoga we speak about these gunas so much, is to give some directions to the students, to all of us, in fact, to be able to distinguish what is the right from wrong and so on. So this is how we can get to the experience of bliss very quickly. Now, for those people who are yogis and meditators, I would like to speak about the yogic way of perception of bliss, as Swami Vishnu's story about golf. So some of you might have heard it, but nevertheless we'll repeat it tonight. When we play golf, something interesting happens. So the purpose of playing the game is to get the ball into the hole. We know that. So we buy the best gear, we go to golf field someplace, and then we want to play. Now, when we play, what we do is we put a little ball on the tee, we hit it with a stick, and then that ball rolls towards the hole and enters into the hole. And then at that moment, when the ball enters into the hole, there's a great experience of bliss. You can say bliss, no problem. And it lasts perhaps for a few moments, and then you come back. And then what do you think? Oh, I played so well. This is so cool. And this is why I'm blissful and happy. So we believe that happiness arose from the game, from a sense of achievement. And the Swami Vishnu used to say, if you think that the happiness arose from the ball being in the hole, then you could also walk up to each one of the holes and put the ball in. However, that's not the case. We know that. So if you think it's from a bigger hole, you should dig a bigger hole, bigger ball, or something like this, make the process easier. That will be the case. Now, what really happens is a yogic explanation of this process will tell us everything we need to know about the happiness. I would say this is like a $1 million key to happiness, very in simple words. So let us try to go back, rewind your little film backwards, and let us see what happens. You are playing the golf. You're the person that plays the golf. And now you're concentrating, and that's the key word, the concentration on the ball. So what does concentration do? The concentration minimizes the number of thoughts, and we, through the process of concentration, choose a single thought to concentrate on. In this case, that will be the thought of the ball. So we hit the ball, and the ball rolls towards the hole. And there's a moment at which your concentration is very high, and then the ball enters into the hole. And at that moment, something happens to your mind. And that is this: there's a sudden experience of cessation of all thoughts in the mind. There are no thoughts. Even the very thought of the ball is gone, or ball in the hole is gone. You're almost at the moment you're not aware anymore of anything. Had you had a knee surgery or anything else, or some pain here and there, or mortgage you have not paid, the whole world has been obliterated at that moment. Wow, this is an incredible experience. Unfortunately, what happens then is that at that moment, there's this welling up of the experience of happiness from within us. Well, did it come from the ball? If you were to look inside of the ball, would you find happiness? Would you find the happiness from any other factor involved in the game? No. The extra experience came from within, but the key to that experience was this concentration that led us into a temporary experience of short, like meditation, like state, in which there was a dissolution of the sense of I, the dissolution of the ego, the dissolution of the whole world. There was nothing. Because the ego, the I, the world, all this is supported through this whole mechanism of thought. So this is the secret of happiness. Now what happens when a person comes out of that experience, he or she thinks, oh, I got to play again. Isn't that the case? Well, now remember, every time you have a pleasure, the same thing happens. You go and you buy a piece of chocolate, or you enjoy something, ordinary, extraordinary, it doesn't matter. The same thing. The moment you reach a peak of experience, which is kind of a bliss, at that moment, nothing exists. Neither that object or person, nor you even yourself as a subject. There is a complete dissolution of subject-object relationship, and only you exist. That is a true happiness. Now, we don't know that. So we're trying to repeat the experience. We think, okay, I got to do it better. Maybe I go to another, experience or another country to play golf. Sometimes people say, oh, maybe if they have a partner, they want to change another partner. They always think that by changing something, the things will, increase the experience of happiness. Well, this is all nice, but it is wrong because it doesn't actually work that way. There may be a day when you can play golf very well and it would not bring you that happiness. You can even get the ball into the hole, no happiness. Why? Because there was no absence of thought, which is a condition. You have to remember that we pay millions of dollars to players around the world, tennis players, soccer players, football players, anybody who can keep your attention to the point of you forgetting yourself. This is why the experience of love is equivalent to experience of love of happiness, because when we experience love, we forget that little I, the little mind. We're sort of in a state of what I may say a flow. So, as a way of experiencing happiness, it would be useful to try to increase our concentration levels in general. So, it's two things: the concentration and purity of the mind are correlated. The purity and the discriminative power of the mind are correlated. So you got to have all three in order for gradually for your mind to purify and then to be able to go into a deeper state of bliss. So because of also these important qualities of Rajas and Tamas, we find that the experience of bliss does not arise in meditation for a long, long, long time. And don't force it. It won't come just by if you force it. No happiness can come forced because it is your true nature. All you have to do is to remove things that are standing in their way, in its way. So remember the story of the golf, and now you will know why people pay money to musicians, to anybody who can keep your concentration level high. And this is when you say, oh, their music was really cool and great and that whatever, and you experience some kind of a little joy. So because of that, we'll come to the next stage, which is an attachment problem. Okay, so attachment is a very peculiar condition of the mind. One of the great reasons why we took the birth is because of some attachment on the other. This attachment is kind of a belief that an object is going to be the cause of our happiness. An object, person, it doesn't matter what it is. So that is, it's a form of a infatuation in a way, because it is primarily based on our imagination and a superimposition. We're not denying that there's a little something that comes from the object also, but it is the imagination that colors this experience of attachment, non-attachment. Because why? You could be attached to somebody or something, but other people would not be attached to that person for whatever other reasons. So this attachment is a problem, because whenever there is an attachment, there cannot be an enjoyment, true enjoyment. There cannot be true bliss. Therefore, in order to be happy, we must learn to be detached in life as much as is possible. Somehow, yogis know that true happiness comes from the mind being under control. Now, mind being under control doesn't mean mind being suppressed. It really means for us to have an awareness to understand the mind as best as we can. So that requires a daily practice. Experience of happiness cannot be had through one particular moment and one particular activity all of a sudden. It needs to be built up. And the only way we do this is by becoming aware of any psychic and emotional phenomena. When I say psychic, I mean the mental phenomena, any emotion, anything like this. Then comes a necessity to control, to curb it or release it, or whatever it is, and understanding. So the first thing to happen is to try to be aware. Awareness is happiness. We obviously have heard this many times, but just watch how often your mind gets caught in mechanical thinking, how often we're pulled in a direction of thinking certain thoughts over and over again. Have you ever experienced that type of a thinking, which is kind of almost addictive, like you can't let go of it. It's almost like the mind is overthinking. So we need to learn to break that. So the best way to learn to be happy is to determine that whatever activities you do them with greater presence of your mind or your awareness. And as you're moving like this, you're going to enter into a state of a flow where you will forget you are the doer of something, and that you're doing something in order to accomplish something. So neither the subject nor the object will be important, but you will enter into the state of flow. Anything that throws you out of the state of flow is in common psychological language called stress. Stress is really defined as an inability to stay in a state of flow. For example, I try to get my mind focused on something, but there is an interruption this way, that way. Since we cannot live in the world without the interruptions, the suggestion would be to integrate the disruptions into the process of concentration. Because we cannot be purely just focused on something at the expense of not seeing or perceiving anything else. So what we can do, if there's a sound coming in, we can hear it, integrate it, be aware of it for a few moments, and then continue to work like that. So it's like a little bit like a dance. What really the process of concentration and detachment requires, as I said, is we can define it by the word flow. For example, if you're listening to the music, and in the music there are millions of bars of some kind of melodic lines and notes and so on, rhythm, and so, but if you try to concentrate only on a specific note which has already passed, you're going to experience a form of a stress even within that kind of a pleasure. So what we need to do is to not try to cling to any particular note in that music, but to try to free ourselves from it and move on. And then you will hear the whole music. Similarly in life, don't hold on to any experience, however beautiful it is. It could be a flower, it could be this and that, for too long. But at the same time, learn to flow. Don't try to possess the flower. Of course, you can look at the flower if you like for a longer time. When I meant don't concentrate for too long, meant don't build attachment for it. But if you want to concentrate on something without needing to possess it, that's a different story. So I always share this example of a person who was in the city here, and she was taking the image of the blossoms in the springtime, and she was using the iPhone, and I was looking at her and I was thinking, why would you take an iPhone? It is a beautiful tree. And she looked at me and she said, isn't it a beautiful tree? And I said, yeah, it's a beautiful tree, of course. She said, I'm taking a picture of it. Then I was thinking to myself, why are you taking the picture of it? Why can't you just look at it? Wouldn't it be a greater happiness of just enjoying something that you're seeing rather than taking a picture of it? Would you like to have a partner that you can just have a picture of? Or would you like to be with a living person? Same thing. Would you like to have a picture of your teacher or a guru or something like that? Or would you like to actually be in the living presence of your teacher? I think one of the reasons why people try to capture this kind of experiences is that, first of all, they've lost the ability to enjoy. They don't really know what it is to be sitting with us. And because of that, the second problem is they feel like the experience is going to fly away from them, and then they will not be able to remember. So there's kind of a desire or almost a greed to have these images of all experiences. Just think about in our modern time with the Facebook and everything, people are continuously recording every experience that they're having. And you wonder why. What is so important to having a picture of your child being taken every single day of your life? But think about 50 years ago or 100 years ago, there wasn't such a thing. Were there people happy with their children? Of course they were. What is the purpose in taking pictures of flowers or birds all the time? Of course, I understand you want to share something. I want to share something. It's an experience for a moment. But then we can also let go of it. There's no harm in sharing something with other people. But I think the point is that we're trying to make a certain experience solid. See, that lady, instead of enjoying the blossoms, which would have been a part of the flow experience, she wanted to have one solid image of it that could just look, she can look at it, and every time she looks at it, she feels good about it. I think in order to experience happiness in life, we need to flow. And in order to flow, we need to learn one more quality, which is found only when you're in love. I must tell you this because I don't mean the love just with another human being. I mean to be in love with life itself. So to find this flow, you can understand that we need to train our eyes to look at things with the new eyes every day. You wake up in the morning, you see the same pictures. Let's say if you're meditating, you probably have a little shrine or altar or something, and you try to look at them with the new eyes. And then there is a plant in your house, you look at it with the new eyes. So this is the idea that I, things can be old, but we need to have the new eyes. Same thing when we do our practice of asanas or postures or anything like this, as I often teach this. Same thing, new eyes. Then when you have the newness coming from within you, you would not need necessarily to change every day as people are doing in our modern times. They cannot enjoy things sufficiently. When I say they cannot enjoy, can't capture the attention span. So things need to be moved fast. Look at the movies also. How quickly the images are moving. If you watch the movie today that was filmed 20 years ago, you will be falling asleep. You will say, oh my God, this is so slow, because we lost the capacity to concentrate. We may think we're smarter and quicker, but that's not necessarily true for the feeling. And for concentration, you have to have a feeling. So I'm going to tell you a short story now. Once upon a time, there was a gentleman in India who was doing his little agricultural work. And he decided to rest. So he lay down under a tree looking at a beautiful horizon. Blue skies, a few clouds here and there. The sun is on the other side, completely restful, enjoying every moment of it. Until somebody came from New York City. And that person, who was a New Yorker, looked at him resting, and I said, hey, how are you doing? What are you doing? And he said, I'm just enjoying myself. I said, but what do you do? I said, well, my work consists in, I just work on this field for a few hours a day. I have a small family, and I, get some grains and some vegetables and so on. And that's it. That's all I do. Now, this guy who's smart, obviously he must have been some kind of a college guy. He said, oh, if you were to put some fertilizers, and what is that? He's asking, what are the fertilizers? So he explained to him, you will have more crops. You could, then he said, then what? And then he said, you can share it with other people. You can give it more to the other family. But he said, they already have enough. What do you want me to share with? He said, okay, well, you can at least sell it. And I said, well, okay, so to sell it for what? He said, well, if you sell it, you could build a bigger house. I said, my house is big enough, don't worry. Okay, so then he said, what would I do if I was to have a bigger house and sell more and make money? He said, well, then you can start to travel and experience the world and everything. And then in the end, he will say, what? So what then? Then what? What? And in the end, he says, you can be happy. I said, well, I'm happy right now. What do you want me to do? You want me to go all around the world to be happy? So this kind of situation, we have, every one of us, we are resting under the tree of our own life created with certain good things and bad things, right? Yet the mind is incessantly restless and is looking for a new thing. Now you already have a relatively enjoyable life. Yes, you have some pain here and there like everybody else. You can't escape it. But nevertheless, let's say most of our lives are okay. And then the mind, because of that, becomes problematic. He wants this experience, that experience, and so on. So take this story as a little reminder on interesting problems that we have in modern times. The next thing that Swami Shivananda mentions in this teaching is the idea of the happiness is the result of happiness given to others. Now, this is a very important thing. The reason why people are not happy today and they're feeling lonely and they're feeling abandoned is because they have separated themselves from others. This is a big issue and problem. The true happiness comes, and we know this from a yogic teachings on the different bodies and causal body and Anandamaya Kosha, which is called. The true cause of happiness is when we do something good for others, when we do something needed, when we do something that alleviate their suffering or they add to their happiness. We are the first receiver of their goodness. So it's very also important to understand that happiness cannot exist or be within us, a true experience in isolation from other beings. In this world of interdependence and intercommunication, we learn that the greater communication and the greater ability to connect with everybody, the greater the bliss we have. This is called, there's two shrishtis, there's two types of visions, Jiva Srishti and also Ishvara Srishti. Sorry, Jiva Drishti, and Ishvara Drishti, not Srishti. My apologies. Drishti means a vision. So Jiva's vision is that an individual self entrapped in the body and mind, I must take care of myself, my family, and only what belongs to me. But Ishvara's drishti is that he is all. Ishvara means God, meaning the creator, the manifested world. You may believe it or not, it doesn't matter. But the experience that we're trying to approximate is that of the Ishvara, that we can identify with everything. I think when you have an ability to identify with other people's emotively, right? Then what happens mentally, of course, cognitive, whatever, then you feel a greater bliss. Let's say you are with children. So you become like one with a child. That is, in a small way, this is like trying to become just like all children. When a man is with women, he is trying to feel and be like one with these women. When also men, women, whatever the combination, the idea is whenever there's a group of people, we try to be one with them. We try to understand them, what their needs are, how they work, and so on. So when I'm with a child, I don't try to behave like some great adult that a child looks up to. No, the child will not look up to that. The child will look up to something or somebody that can feel the child's spirit in a child. Similarly, each group of people is like this. Therefore, we must do whatever we can to open our hearts to connect with everybody and everything. So Swami Shivananda says, the absence of mamata, which is the sense of I and mine, is the true cause of happiness. And I'm going to share a couple of readings from a very wonderful sage called Nisargadatta Maharaj, who you may have heard of. He says, pleasures are like fishes, very few and swift, rarely come and quickly gone. This is what the pleasures are. Now, somebody asked this master, what is the state of true happiness? Or we call it enlightenment. He says it's the state unclouded by memory and expectation, living in now. It is happiness of open spaces, of open space, of being young, of having all the time and energy for doing things, for discovery. So that experience is what we call true happiness. So this is the end of our talk. I hope you enjoyed it.